In the afternoon. We'll call Ms. Solatel. Are you on the phone? Okay, not present. Or she is on the phone?
No, it doesn't look like she is yet. We'll keep an eye out. That's just in case, because we were told she would be, Mr. Bowen said she would be.
When you see her pop up, would you call it out and name it?
Will do.
Okay. Mr. Bowen. Here. Present. Mr. Trombley. Here. And Trustee Ms. Boken, Mr. Aline. I think we have a quorum. Aaron, you want to please do the public involvement announcements?
Yes, sir. AMAT's committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are presented by staff or consultant. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn off your camera when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute, press *6. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. All right. Do we have an approval of the agenda as submitted?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and
Meg
seconded.
says she is online now.
Meg did join.
Okay. Just record show that Ms. Zalatel joined at 1:33. Meg, can you hear us okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we've got a moved and seconded. Do we have any changes to the agenda? None stated. Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. All right, for agenda item 4, we have before us the minutes of the February 23rd, 2023 for approval. Motion for these minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any changes or discussion? Okay, any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none. February 23rd, 2023 minutes are approved. All right, let's dive right into the action items. We got the operating agreement membership title change. Aaron, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, so in the AMAT's operating agreement, it lists out the committee member makeup for the technical advisory committee and the policy committee. Back in 2019, the operating agreement was updated to change the air quality advisory committee representative on the TAC to the energy and sustainability manager for the municipality of Anchorage. Recently, Shana Kilcoyne, who was filling in that position, left MOA service. I reached out to the solid waste service director to find out if that position was going to be refilled at any point, and never received any kind of response back. It's been a number of months now, and we have one less person on the TAC and would really like to get that position filled as soon as possible. So staff was kind of mulling, how do we fill it? Who do we fill it with? And Craig Lyon came up with an awesome idea of adding somebody from Parks and Recreation onto the Technical Advisory Committee. We work very closely with Parks and Recreation, especially recently on transportation projects. We're doing a lot of trail work with them. So having them as a representative on the TAC would be very beneficial for AMAT. So this was brought before the Technical Advisory Committee. They had a little bit of discussion on it and ultimately recommended approval of this change. And Steve Rayfuse, who is here, will be the representative on the Technical Advisory Committee, and Taylor Keegan will be his alternate if he's unable to make it. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee on this? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public on this recommended action? You have 3 minutes to speak. Please say your name. Anybody online? Okay. What's the will of the committee?
Move to approve. Second.
So we're going to give it to you this time. And Daniel, can I give you a second?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Moved and seconded. Any objections to approving the motion? All right. Hearing none, the motion is approved. All right. Action item 5B, critical urban freight corridors. Aaron.
It'll actually not be me today. That was the last little bit I get to do. So okay. Turn this over to John Sissel.
John, good
afternoon. So I also, on AMAT, serves Freight Mobility Coordinator to the Freight Advisory Committee. So the matter before you today, the Technical Advisory Committee considered this matter on March 9th, and they recommended that it go forward to the Policy Committee. But there were several questions that the chair of the committee, Brad Coy, or excuse me, of the Technical Advisory Committee, Brad Coy, had that I've subsequently researched since then, and as part of my remarks today, I'll hopefully cover those. So a little bit of background information is in order. So last December, DOT completed and approved the statewide freight plan as part of the state's long-range transportation plan, which is Alaska Moves 2050. And I put on your next year on your desk Appendix I on that, which is germane to what we're discussing today. So for urbanized areas under 500,000 population, the state, in consultation with representative MPOs, may designate the public roads within the borders of those areas as critical urban freight corridors, CUFCs. And the statewide freight plan had a steering committee with representation from the Muni's Freight Advisory Committee, and the chair of that committee, Joe Michelle, is here today. Joe also serves as the executive director of the Alaska Trucking Association. So what you're being asked to do today is to approve 30.3 miles of freight corridors known as CUFCs to leverage highway freight program funds. And CUFCs are priority freight segments that typically consist of first or last mile connector routes from high volume freight corridors to freight intensive land and key urban freight facilities such as the Port of Alaska. And the statewide freight plan identified 30.3 miles of CUFCs. And so in that little packet that I provided you, if you turn to page 2, the blue one, in the top left-hand corner illustrates the existing federal freight network and Anchorage. On page 3, it lists the proposed primary highway freight system and the critical urban freight corridors. So the concerns expressed at the TAC meeting on March 9th, I researched a little bit, and one of them concerned the issue of safety. And so the only effect that CUFC classification has on a roadway is to enable a wider range of funding opportunities for projects on that designated corridor. The two major funding sources involved are the National Highway Freight Program and FAC Grants Program. And they have multiple goals which direct how that funding can be utilized, and safety projects are not precluded from that funding. The second concern was relating to downtown impacts of the freight corridors. And the designation of a CUFC does not necessarily make it more difficult to redirect trucks away from downtown. However, as the C Street corridor is already part of the AMAT's designated freight routes, there's already an expectation of freight consideration for this route. So any action that reduces the effectiveness of this facility as a freight route must be weighed against existing AMAT's planning documents. But again, the CUFC designation comes with no additional constraints. The inclusion of C Street in particular to the list of CUFC recommendations was recommended by the AMAT's Freight Advisory Committee. So that's why it's included. If you look at the memo, you'll see the list of segments. The A Street corridor was not called out, as I understand it, because it is considered part of the couplet that includes the freight corridor. Now, if you choose to specify A Street, including, so from 5th Street to Tudor Road is approximately, if I did the calculation correctly, about 2.5 miles. So that would come to a total of 32.8 miles of critical urban freight corridors. So that's, if I've missed anything, hopefully someone from the cheap sheets can help me out. Yes, sir.
So I'm not gonna lie, I kind of lost you a little bit. It's not your fault, completely mine, trust me. In regards to A and C Street, if we do add those as freight corridors, because I'm just pulled up Google Maps. That's kind of that's one of the routes to get down to the port. You know, there's a move to want to do, I believe it's either C or A, or maybe it's A and C, to do complete streets. If we start looking at complete streets with freight corridors, are we looking at further congesting those locations because now we're adding bike lanes, and are we increasing potential traffic incidents with bicyclists, walkers, since it is a freight corridor?
Yeah, good question. As I understand complete streets, you know, not every street will be designed in the same way. And even within a street corridor, there are different design elements that can be incorporated. So to accommodate, you know, perhaps freight or bicyclists, pedestrians. So I think the answer to your question is that, yes, freight can be accommodated, and depending on the design, other users as well.
Okay, and then remind me, if we wanted to add A and C Street, which actually makes sense to me, do I need to specify? I mean, I've never studied this issue. This is the first time I've ever heard of it. Do I need to specify from A Street, from Government Hill to hypothetically 15th Avenue? That would be a freight corridor. I mean, how would I add A Street, or would it just be all of A Street, because A Street actually ends up merging back into C Street? So how would I do that?
Which is why I think originally when the Freight Advisory Committee looked at that, A and C do combine into C Street and go south. So I think based on my understanding, looking at the segments that were listed in the memo, from Fifth Street to Tudor would be the segment that you would want to include.
Do you mean Fifth Avenue?
Excuse me, Fifth Avenue,
Okay.
yes. Fifth Avenue to Tudor.
Just for A Street?
Just for the A Street segment, yes, sir.
To Tudor. And what was C Street?
Well, C is already included.
Oh,
in
C's,
the
I'm
list.
sorry, you're right, C Street's already.
Yeah, that's part of that 30.3 miles that was recommended in the statewide freight plan.
Gotcha. So then, and just remind me, doing complete streets on A and C, that's not a mandate to do complete streets. When that area is reimagined and federal funding and maybe whatever it is, whoever's doing that planning for A and C Street, they're gonna look and say, oh, that's a freight corridor. So actually maybe a complete street doesn't work for that location. They take that into account, correct? Is that how I understand it?
It's a hypothetical question which I
Sure.
have difficulty answering, but I
Understand.
think the designers, when they get to that point, will take all the users into consideration for the design of those corridors.
Okay, I understand. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So I think I have a similar question as Adam, and we may be coming from a different viewpoint, but a designation of a critical urban freight corridor would not preclude a complete streets reconstruction.
No.
That's an easier way to ask it.
And then I guess my second question is, right now we are sort of in the process really of kind of reimagining safety and mobility. I would prioritize them that way personally throughout downtown. So whether it's A and C, a complete streets coming up, a study on our transportation improvement program, which I think that one's out in year 2026 anyway. And that would determine I think that study would ask the question of whether it's feasible or not to do complete streets there. But also the Pell study right now in Fairview, what that's going to look like. And we just had our first alternatives workshop on that. Are we going to do the cut and cover? Are we going to reroute traffic around Fairview and go up, sort of through East Anchorage? I know that soon to be started with Planning Department and Traffic is going to be the Downtown Streets Engineering Study. One of our legislative priorities, which was a collaboration of both the administration and the assembly, was local control of 5th and 6th streets, and that's a question that we'll be exploring when the assembly starts our transportation committee, which I think is going to be either late April or early May. So there's just a lot swirling right now in terms of how we reimagine flow through downtown and through Fairview. And I think that's going to have big impacts on how A and C Street are utilized in the future. So I guess my question is, this designation, while it could be great in terms of getting funding, different funding opportunities, including perhaps safety projects, is this something that can't be undone in the future, or that would? I just wonder if C Street and A Street are premature on this list, just because I think things could really change in the next even 5 years, depending on how we utilize downtown streets. That was really long and convoluted.
Yeah, so the designation as it stands is identified in the memo, identifies certain segments that would be eligible for additional money from the federal government for freight-related activities on those segments. Okay, I can't speak to the other, the other pieces of roadway streets that you mentioned, but you're right. I mean, it's all part of a bigger system. So, and the list can change. The list, the mileages could change. But without the approval of this body and then submitting that, then, because if you do, subsequent to the approval, I have to then send a memo to DOT saying, yes, this is going through the AMATS, TAC, PC, and please add these segments to the list, that the feds keep, so that could then trigger those funding opportunities in the future. Without it, then it's, because right now we don't have any designated freight corridors recognized by the federal government.
Is that like, what's that, HFS? That's different. That's not freight.
Yeah, sorry about the acronyms. I believe that's primary highway. Help me out here, guys.
I think it's primary highway freight system.
Yeah, freight system, which does not apply in this case.
Can I ask one more question, Sheriff? But what's the time-sensitive nature of this? I think it might be helpful for me to do some research, and like Adam said, this is the first some of us have heard of this. I did watch that technical advisory committee meeting back, so I caught some of that discussion, but in terms of highway freight program funds and fast lane grants, it might be helpful for me to know what that money can be used for. Do a little research.
And I can get you those links to those documents.
Is this something we need to vote on, decide today, or?
No, I think if you need some additional time to take a look at this, that would be okay. But just recognizing that the statewide plan, which those segments are listed from, that was approved last December. And so we're trying to play catch up to get, our Anchorage's designations recognized by the federal government. But the statewide plan is a required document that has to be submitted to federal highways, and as well as the freight plan component of that.
Yeah, I don't see C Street on the list. Maybe I'm missing it.
It's on the memo.
It's on the memo.
Is
The AMATS memo.
that different?
From the port to O'Malley, which is approximately 9.2 miles.
My fault. I was looking at that.
Yeah.
My fault.
Yeah,
Got
sorry, multiple pieces of paper.
Okay, got it.
One question, Jen. So the freight routes are already designated by by typology in the Anchorage Bowl. Is that a correct statement? We're just codifying this at a federal level for.
I mean, this is this is a new designation that came out with FAST, I think it is, or MAP 21, one of the two designations. So in terms of like their designation, whether arterial or collector or something, that's a separate thing on its own. This is kind of like an additional thing saying, okay, is this a critical freight route? And if so, it's eligible for this additional funding that's come new as part of the federal legislation.
Okay. And with regard to that federal funding mechanism, are there strings attached to that funding that encumbers that corridor for future things?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to dig into that a little bit.
I think it's a fair question. We've seen land and water conservation funds used in Chugach State Park, and when we've executed projects in there, that strings attached function caused us quite a lot of effort to make any changes anytime in the future. So when we're looking at whether or not to categorize these things and accept those grant funds, the conditions of the grant funds can be a big deal. And so I think it's important that we go into that eyes wide open about what those strings.
I'd be willing to go back and do the research and get an answer for you for that.
If you don't, you might wish you had. Because then if you did try to pull it or change it or reconfigure or reimagine 10 years down the road, and you've obligated that corridor to those types of grant funds, you might find yourself hitting a wall.
Even just for me instinctively, the name fast lane grant, when I hear from my constituents constantly about, we want to go slower, we want to do traffic calming.
Right.
I'm just like, I want to know more about what that money can be used for.
So I think the grant obligations associated with the funding are every bit as important to understand those. And if we don't understand those yet, I think we need to ask you to go back and take a look at that.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion at the committee level? Okay. Any discussion or comments from the public on this matter?
Hello, my name is Jim Michelle. I'm with the Alaska Trucking Association. I'm not the complete author of the list, but I just want to kind of give you the history of how this came about. When we started doing the statewide long-range freight transportation plan, it's a document that DOT's got to produce once every 10 years. I learned about critical urban freight corridors and miles and critical rural freight miles. And in the previous iteration, there was a limited amount of urban and rural miles that the state could designate. They're using all the rural miles between Fairbanks, where Fairbanks started going up to the Dalton Highway. And there was only about, I think it was 50 critical urban freight miles that were allotted. Over the course of doing that document, that allotment was increased. But 10 years ago, Fairbanks had peeled off about 10 miles of it for their Van Horn area, and Anchorage just skipped designating any of these critical urban freight miles completely. So when I saw that, I was like, there's just a bucket of ducats that, we're leaving money on the table. So in conjunction with working with the Central Region Planners for DOT, we just kind of birthed this list from previous documents that kind of in the Anchorage municipality had already designated these corridors and things of that nature. And learning about the critical urban miles, now that the designation isn't set at just a specific amount of 50 miles for the whole state, I think it was allotted up to another 200 miles. In working with the consultants that work with FHWA, you can interchange these miles. You don't have to wait for 10 years to change the designation for anything a critical urban freight mile could be used. And then so the AMATs is much more nimble than the feds, where if you're looking at projects that might be right on the horizon, that suddenly can turn into a critical urban freight mile. So you can be nimble enough to look at the projects, and this little bucket of ducats might be enough to get it over the hump. I don't have an answer, just like John does, about the strings attached, but for in speaking about and learning about it from the statewide freight transportation plan, the fact that they're so interchangeable that you could just refile with the feds and move them around. There was thoughts on my part on whether I wanted just to, slide you guys a document that had only 3 critical urban freight miles and it'd be down by Ruby Road, where we're have a lot of trouble with our trucks coming out the port. I didn't try to be slick, and we just kind of did what Anchorage already had on. If you go down to municipal, not the municipal part, but the maintenance department and, for the Anchorage municipality, I got maps and found that there was already, these routes. And as much, talk about C and, the concerns and stuff like that, unless you figure out a way to move the port, the C and A streets are always going to be a critical urban corridor, whether it's designated or not. But I just wanted to give you guys the history of where this stuff kind of was birthed from.
I appreciate it, Joe.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, and John, if you can get back to us maybe next month, I think we can turn this around quickly, but I think we've got a few questions still.
Yeah, be happy to do that.
Okay. Any other public comments, online or otherwise? Okay. Do we want to table this until next month?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, really the only one that gives me pause personally is C Street. So
C Street.
I would almost be fine. Well, no, I think I would like to know a little bit more before we act.
Okay.
So yes, I would like to table this till next.
Yeah, I don't see a problem to table it for 30 days. Issues.
Can we amend it before we table it? Or do you have to table
And then when we come back, then we'll have a better picture of what's going on here. And if it's adjustments like C Street, parentheses, couplet, and, adjustments like that.
it? Yeah, I think it makes sense to add A Street if you're gonna have C Street. You have coming and going, I don't understand why you wouldn't have A Street if you have C Street. It's a major,
Well, the couple portion of it.
couple, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it goes from 4th, John, all the way to 2.
Does it?
I don't know, I'm looking at.
It's like
I looked at-
third, it's like
actually
third,
third.
tutor,
Oh, okay,
where
yeah,
it
I
splits.
guess-
And,
I missed a couple.
We would have to then amend C Streets from 5th to 3rd, so.
Ms. Delatel has her hand up, just so you know.
Okay, yeah, maybe, John, we could think about how you could reword that to be inclusive of the couplet zone within the C Street area. But I think that's fair. Meg, you had your hand up, I heard?
Yeah, thank you. So are we expecting a changed document or just more information to come back if we table this? Because I think those are two different approaches.
We're looking for just some more information for now, and if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to maybe make the changes when we come back and have that additional information.
Yeah, that would order of operations. Okay, thanks.
Sir?
Quick question. So would the same apply?
I'm sorry, could you say your name?
Yes, Steve Rayfuse. Would the same apply with Northern Lights between Minnesota and Muldoon? Because you have the Benson couplet as well.
That's a fair question.
Well, those were not included as part of the recommended, they're already part of, I believe, the National Highway system. Not part of.
It shows Northern Lights here. That Minnesota does.
Every time we look at this, you're like, oh, is there something else we need to add?
I mean,
So that
To
would,
be
that
fair.
would need to be discussion next
yeah.
time.
We can discuss more of this, I think, or maybe for now, John, you'll go back and get some more information, and we can do maybe you could review your typology, and we can get back next month and hammer out the details. And Joe, if you've got more information too on grant assurances or strings, or please let us know.
There's always a hook with it.
There's always. All right, any other comments from the public? Okay, so
We'll move to postpone to the meeting of April.
policy committee.
The policy committee meeting in April.
Second.
There we go.
Seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, motion is approved. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. More homework for you, sorry.
That's all right.
That's the way it goes.
That's why I get paid the big bucks, right?
That's right. Okay. All right. On to action item 5C, Freight Advisory Committee nominations. Carlos Rojas, I believe I pronounced that correctly, and Helena Wisniewski. I'll work on that. Thank you for your patience. Karen.
John will be doing this as well.
It's the John show today. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so we currently have 2 vacancies on the Freight Advisory Committee. And we have two excellent candidates to have you consider today to fill those vacancies. The first one is Carlos Rojas, who works with the state with the commercial vehicle compliance with DOT. He has, I think, approximately 25 years of transportation-related experience, and he will be filling the seat that is, we have a commercial vehicle compliance seat on the Freight Advisory Committee. So he is agreed to serve in that capacity. I don't know if you want to do each of these separately, or I can move on and tell you about the next candidate. However you want to do that.
You can tell us about the next candidate. If we have questions, we can answer.
Okay, so the second candidate would fill the vacant academic seat for UAA, and previously that had been held by Darren Prokop with the UAA's freight logistics program. Darren has since retired and moved out of state, and so between Joe Michelle with the ATA and myself, found a candidate to fill that position also with UAA, and that's Dr. Helena Wisniewski. And she comes with a tremendous amount of experience in entrepreneurship, business. She apologized for not being able to be here today. She had another commitment. But I provided her a bio in the staff memo for you to look at. So those are the two candidates for the Freight Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you, John. Any questions or comments from the committee on the nominations? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public on the nominations? All right, hearing none, what is the will of the committee?
Do we have to approve them each, or can we just do them both at once? Doesn't matter. All right. Move to approve Carlos Rojas and Dr. Helena, I'm going to butcher this, was it?
Wisniewski.
Wisniewski.
Second.
Give a second. Moved and seconded. Any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you to you both for volunteering.
Thank you.
Okay, Aaron, any other action items?
No, but there is something I missed, and I don't want to go any longer without missing it. But we have a new member up here on the dais, if you have not seen. Rhiannon Brown is joining us from the Muni Planning Department. She's helping out with our meetings, helping to run the meetings and everything. So just heads up, you'll be seeing more of her.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your help. Anything else, Aaron?
No action items. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 6A, AMAT's model information. We'll look at you, Aaron, and you will point to somebody else. So,
This will be John Cecil to start
okay,
with.
that would be John again.
John, just don't move.
Yeah, just stay there, John.
You get to see you seeing me, hearing me today. But yeah, online will be Robert Wortman with RSG, who's the contractor that we're working with to update the travel demand model. And so I will, in the interest of time, turn it over to Robert to give you a brief high-level overview on the status of the update, of the model update, which is being used for the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation.
Thanks, John. Please share my screen here. You guys could confirm for me that you can see it.
Can we? Yeah, I can turn it. It's
I
fine.
got it. Like the TV's rotated. So. Make sure. Sorry, members of the public, you may have to move as well. Okay. Can the policy committee members see the TV now? Perfect. Can you guys see the TV? You can see the TV. You might not know. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So we'll launch into it. I'm Bobby Wortman. I'm a consultant at RSG. I've been with RSG for about almost 4 years now, and then prior to that, I spent 7 years as a principal transportation planner at an Indiana MPO, where I headed the systems planning and analysis group. And so today we're going to talk about just kind of the work that we've completed now at this point for AMATs, and go over a high level overview of each of the components. So the project also had 2 development feasibility reports pertaining to active transportation and benefit cost analysis. The active transportation component reviewed best practices and gave recommendations to the AMATs staff on how to improve the model component or the model to be more sensitive to active transportation. And we recommended near-term improvements, which were implemented as part of the model update process. And then we also gave options for 2 longer improvements that could either be for a facility demand sketch tool that could be used, for example, for a specific corridor, or a fully separate bicycle, pedestrian, and demand model, which would be a more extensive undertaking. And then the second development feasibility report that we produced was on benefit cost analysis tools. And this is essentially scoping out and giving a cost estimate for tool development that would allow AMATs to extract more information out of the travel demand model. And so this would be looking at what we call the triple bottom line of equity measures. So looking at things like travel time and cost, travel time reliability on a corridor, physical activity along the corridor, vehicle ownership costs, different travel options, such as like destination and mode accessibilities to different areas within the Anchorage area. Also being able to pull out highway safety benefits, various different emissions benefits, which are becoming increasingly more important. You'd be able to pull out surface and water runoff costs from the model system, things like noise and vehicle operating costs. So this is essentially a component that processes results from the travel demand model and reports out metrics that relate directly to performance measures or areas of interest that the MPO might be wanting to explore. So I'll launch into our model updates now, which is essentially updating the base year data and the underlying model code. So why update the travel demand model? So our models are important because they support the development of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And they assist decision makers in making informed transportation planning decisions. And this can come in the format of testing various different policy scenarios. It could be testing individual investments or a package of investments and relating it back to the MTP or a corridor plan. And the biggest strengths of travel demand models are that they enable the ability to ask the what if questions about policies or plans. And the big caveat here, and you may have heard a famous quote by a statistician, Peter Box, but the models need to be sensitive to policy questions that might be asked of it. And this is basically saying what Peter Box says, that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So in order for us to have useful models, we need to understand what the policy questions we're asking it are going to be. And then from there, we can develop the model so that it's a useful travel demand model. So the travel demand model is made up of zones. These are aggregations of different geographies within the model region. And what you're seeing right now is essentially the entire scope and extent of the areas that are modeled in the travel demand model. These are divided into 918 total zones. In this development effort, we didn't really modify the zones too much. We did add some splits around J-Bear along the Glen Highway, and that was essentially just to separate the military base activity from some recreational activity that was being grouped into the model before. So it was important to have the geographic fidelity of those recreational areas split out from the military base. We also have the transportation network as well as the transit network. There's a total of 4,500 total links in the model network and 336 controlled intersections. And together with our partners at R&M, we updated roadway geometry, attributes, lane, speed, median type, functional classifications. We also worked to get better fidelity at signalized and controlled intersections by essentially breaking out what's called the upstream functional intersection area, which is essentially a very long way of saying the area of the road that's really tied directly to the intersection itself. That's important when you might have a link that spans multiple miles, and at the end of that link is a controlled intersection. The impacts of that intersection aren't felt along the entire corridor. They're really felt in an area near the intersection. And then we updated the socioeconomic data, or included this updated socioeconomic data. This was conducted by McKinley Research Group as part of the MTP effort, and then we reviewed the assumptions for reasonableness. And then this was directly added into the base year socioeconomic data that the model uses today. We did make two big model enhancements. One was to the special generator model, which is essentially the military model. Previous model updates have always just kind of carried over the military assumptions. We had better count data this time, so that really enabled us to really fine tune observed trips into and out of JBER and really better calibrate the associated trip making behavior of the military base. And then we had sensitivity to walking as well. So we increased the model sensitivity to walking based on capturing better land use and transportation interactions. And this was borrowed from previous work conducted in San Diego, and then obviously scaled to match the travel behavior here in Anchorage that we see. And then finally, we calibrated the travel demand model. Based off of federal highway guidance, the Federal Highway Administration has a report. It's from their travel model improvement program. That's called the Travel Modeling Validation Reasonableness Checking Manual, as you can see on the slide. In there are two recommendations, a set of calibration parameter or criteria to use, one from the Ohio DOT, the other one from the Florida DOT. The AMATS model was calibrated to the Florida DOT standards, which are called the Florida Standard Urban Transportation Model Structure, or FACUDMS. And the reason why we chose the FACUDMS or the FDOT standards is because it gives us, it offers greater detail across multiple calibration dimensions at multiple scales. So they give us report out metrics of how to calibrate the model, or where the model should be calibrated at a regional level versus a corridor level. It also gives us different dimensions to look at calibration by volume grouping, by different streamline technical factors. So our preference at RSG is always calibrate using the FACUDMS standards. And then the calibration data that we used were traffic counts provided by Alaska DOT and PF. And we used average weekday boardings from People Mover, the previous AMATS household travel survey, and then passively collected big data that was from the Seward Glen PL study. And with that, I've reached the end of my presentation, and happy to take any questions from the policy committee or members of the public.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee? You understood every bit of that. Okay. Okay. Hearing none from the committee, any questions from the public on the subject? Anybody online? I mean, is there actually anybody online at all? Awesome. All right. Hearing none. Thank you very much for the presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item 6B, Destination UMED Study. John, would you like to tell us something about this?
Do I have a choice?
All right.
So our next presenter is with Nelson Nygaard, and they are the contractor that we partnered with to produce the Destination UMED Study. And hopefully all of you have seen parts and pieces of the presentations that we've had up to date on that. And so Phil Olmsted is here to give you the latest update on where that study stands. So I'll turn it over to Phil.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Can everyone hear me? All right, let me share my screen in 1 minute. everyone see that?
Yep, we got it.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, policy committee members. My name is Phil Olmstead. I'm a principal at Nelson Nair Consulting Associates. We're a national transportation planning firm and leading the consultant work on this effort. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. We don't have any action items for you, but did want to give a brief update on the work to date and where we're headed. Apologies if I go fast. This is trying to get through about 10 months of work in 5 minutes. So just a reminder for folks what Destination UMED is. It's a transportation demand management study. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Our charge is really to develop a plan and toolkit that the district and its various stakeholders can implement over time to make it easier to travel to, from, and within the district. We're not focused on any single roadway or infrastructure project, really looking at a holistic, long-term, and comprehensive strategic plan. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that means in a second, but it's likely a mix of projects, policies, and programs. Just a reminder that this effort is really, its origins came from the 2016 UMED district plan. One of its core transportation recommendations was to do a TDM study, also really emphasizing the need for UMED stakeholders to continue to collaborate and coordinate within the district. TDM, very wonky term, fancy way of saying let's make our transportation system as efficient as possible. At its core, TDM is trying to reduce vehicle traffic and improve other mobility options. And to be clear, that doesn't mean we're trying to get everyone out of their car. Certainly in UMED, we've heard loud and clear that people are going to continue to drive to and from that district. That's fine. But what we're really trying to do is make it easier to not drive for certain types of trips or end users, especially at peak travel periods. It's also not about a silver bullet, but really finding the right mix of strategies. We typically talk about 4 kind of interrelated buckets around physical infrastructure, communications and marketing of our transportation choices, policies and programs, and pricing of our transportation assets. This is our study area from Lake Otis to Baxter and Northern Lights to Tudor. Definitely know that UMED is not an island, but integrated into the broader city and area, but ultimately focusing on this geography. We also definitely know that UMED is not one user. There's a large array of stakeholders, big and small, some of your major employment institutions, economic generators, as well as smaller businesses and very robust residential communities within our study area. Quick recap of our schedule. We got going roughly a year ago, spring of last year, and we are well into our desire, what we call our desire and kind of design phases, developing a set of strategies, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And moving towards our second community workshop, April 26th, that will be virtual. Really encourage all of you to get the word out about that, and looking to wrap up by summer of this year. I've done a lot of work thus far. I'll summarize a lot of that in a second, but just highlighting that we formed an advisory committee specifically for this project called the UAC, UMED Advisory Committee. A lot of alphabet soup there on the right, but really just making sure that we're connecting with the key stakeholders in UMED. We've had 3 meetings thus far with this group, and doing our best to make sure that they can weigh in and guide us along the way. We've also had a lot of great one-on-one conversations with many of these folks and institutions and stakeholders. I was able to talk with a number of the transportation and sustainability staff at Providence just this morning, and learned a lot about some of their interest and efforts to implement a lot of the ideas already that we have in this plan. So just quickly highlighting some of the work we've done. We had a great site tour back in May, started to meet with the advisory committee and groups individually, really helped see the conditions on the ground and talk to folks. We shared out did a big site tour assessment. We have a project website. You can go to destinationumedstudy.com and find all of this information in tremendous detail. but we have a lot of collateral about the project. We did a travel survey in the fall, really trying to understand and deepen our understanding of travel behavior from folks who live, work, recreate, go to appointments within the UMED, and that's really helping inform our strategy development. Again, we looked at a lot of existing conditions and summarized that in a state of the system report. This was a snapshot of our work with the community back in October, where we got a lot of great qualitative feedback and had some amazing conversations with folks who experience UMED on a day-to-day basis. And done a lot of best practices work, really looking at examples across the country about how different TDM strategies have been implemented in similar districts and kind of showcasing proof of concept. We have a detailed analysis of our travel survey also available on the website. So translating all that work into where we're at today, we've really distilled a lot of the feedback into some goal statements. Any good planning project begins with, or is anchored in a set of goal statements, really trying to make sure that we define a long-term vision and ways by which we can measure progress. So these are some of the values and goals that have emerged both from our quantitative work and also our discussions with the UMED community. So really emphasizing more multimodal trips, safety and comfort, particularly those for those who are not in a car, making sure we provide equitable travel options. I think as folks know, UMED needs to provide safe mobility for not just employees, but also young students who may be going to the elementary school, also older folks who may be going to medical appointments. So really a cross section of everyone who might be traveling within your community. Really coordinating and delivering enhanced communication around transportation services. We've heard a lot about the winter barriers to safe and direct travel, particularly I think been pronounced this winter. And then, providing more travel options, catalyzing growth and economic vitality, knowing that we want to kind of continue to support growth from our core institutions in the district. And we've started to find that into a set of strategies. Again, no magical solution, really trying to find the right combination of infrastructure, policy, programs, marketing to these different user groups. And again, also trying to find the right set of strategies for individual institutions versus what UMED might advance as a district. And I'll highlight this briefly, but we've started to develop a framework and a specific list of right now 23 specific recommendations organized by those hopefully familiar buckets. Really see all of these as crucial to long-term success. There's certainly a prioritization process that's happening with the community right now. We can't do all of this at one time. So really thinking about the phasing of these different types of strategies. I can highlight a few quickly. In physical infrastructure, again, really honing in on some improvements around winter maintenance and safety and connectivity in and around the district. Within the communications and management, really hoping to formalize some more coordination efforts and communication efforts. Thinking about pricing, particularly around parking assets. This is one where we really want to make sure that this is calibrated. We're not talking about pricing all of the parking right away in this district. That's certainly not where I think this is headed, but giving institutions the tools to potentially do that down the road. And then lots of different ideas around programs and policies. Heard a lot of great feedback and interest in more formal carpooling efforts, making sure that folks have access to People Mover's great UPass program, thinking about new innovative ideas around guaranteed ride home programs, and continuing to kind of tie into larger policy reforms within the city. So that's a lot. I'll stop there. Just a few prompts for potential feedback from you all. But yeah, open to thoughts, feedback, comments, questions.
Yeah, so I'm on the website right now. One of the questions I have is that I believe it's called the Elmore Extension or Northern Extension. I'm not entirely sure what it's called anymore, but I remember reading statistics where it showed that if that extension went through to, I think it's Burgaw, You would actually cut down on ambulance times to the hospital, which we know within, certain health conditions, those are life-saving seconds. Was there any, discussion about the UMED extension or the Elmore extension going through that APU land, provide connectivity and open up that additional APU land for development of some student housing or whatever?
Yeah, so the roadway extension has certainly come up in our conversations. It's been, part of the dialogue around this district for a long time. This plan, that is not its primary focus, is not new roadway capacity or new roadway development. We're really looking at this broader suite of policies and programs and improvements to our existing street network to make it safer for all modes. So that is, as of now, not, it is not a specific recommendation in this study. I think in working with staff, the likely better opportunity for a project like that would be within the MTP. That's where something like that would a recommendation around that would emerge.
It's kind of out of scope. New roads. This is more of a study where they take existing mechanisms they can use to improve levels of service for all modes.
Got it.
Yeah. So, any other questions from the committee on this one?
Well, it might be interesting. I've had the opportunity to see this presentation already, and thank you, John, who's still here, for the invite on that. I thought that guaranteed ride home component was interesting. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and we've been able to brief a couple of the other assembly members and trying to do that one-on-one to get everyone's feedback as much as we can. So yeah, guaranteed ride home programs are a great TDM strategy. They're often really applicable in a district such as this, where we have, for example, someone who works at the hospital and may want to take transit in the morning, and then when they get off their shift at night, that transit service is not running anymore. So what do, right? So that's often a big barrier for people to trying transit, or folks are interested in maybe taking transit 1 or 2 days a week, driving the other 3, but they're afraid what might happen if they have to go pick up their kid if they get sick at school. So guaranteed ride home programs, there's lots of great examples where essentially that employee would get a free or subsidized ride to get home. There are all sorts of ways to do that now with taxi vendors or Ubers and Lyfts. Can all be done through voucher codes, through smartphones, lots of different ways to fund that program, whether it's through a municipality or through an individual institution. So we do a lot of work with hospitals throughout the country who have voucher codes with an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi company that allow them to pay for that employee's ride home. There's often parameters around that. You can't do it every day, but a couple times a year, or a couple times a month. And we've heard great interest from that. Folks from South Central, just in our conversation with Providence this morning, really interest around programs like that.
Oh, real quick on this, Wolfgang, the map for the study area includes a fairly significant portion of residential. Was there a reason it extended to the east so far into that residential neighborhood?
Defer to staff a little bit on kind of how they drew the line. I'll just say that there's been a lot of interest from those residential communities because they're so impacted by kind of the trip activity happening within the UMED core. They've been a great partner thus far, and we've been presenting to the community councils, and they seem to be really invested in kind of not just solutions for residents, but solutions for the employees. But I would defer to staff a little bit on kind of how the boundary was exactly drawn for the purposes of the study.
So, John Cecil, I believe the study boundaries are consistent with what came out of the 2016 district plan, the UMED district plan.
Okay. And Phil, you said you had been integrating with all the community councils in the adjacent areas. Is that true?
Yeah, a number of them are actually on the advisory committee. So the UMED advisory committee, they have representation. There's community councils that are directly in our study area or touch it. We've been trying to meet with them, as many of them as possible. So in addition to them being on the advisory committee, we've had some great one-on-one conversations as well. So, and John, I believe, staff has also presented at a couple of the community councils at their standing meetings.
John, did they have a presence at the transportation fair back in January?
Yes, we did. We shared a table with one of my colleagues here.
Okay.
I think it was Johnny, but yeah, we met with some folks that came by the table and talked to them about the study as it was at that point.
And it's virtual only in April. Phil, what's the reason for that?
It's virtual. Yes, it is virtual in April. I think the reason is partially just how we defined the scope. We were in person in October, and we will be out one more time towards the tail end of the project once we have that draft plan, and the plan is to be there in person. So we have a third workshop, three workshops with the community, 2 of which will be in person.
What's the completion date for this effort?
For the project, I can't give the exact date, but we're targeting, I think, June, July to be wrapped up.
Of this year?
Yes.
So you're going to have one more workshop in addition to the virtual workshop before?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Phil. Any other questions from the committee on this one? Any questions from the public? Okay, thank you, Phil.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you all.
John, you want to stand up again? Okay. Agenda item 6C.
You will be getting, sorry, Chair, you will be getting a copy of the complete study when it's completed.
Perfect, appreciate it. All right, that was 6B. Item 6C, Transportation Systems Management and Operations Plan Update.
Pulled the fast one on you. It's not John. It is Christine Schutte for the next 2.
Well played, Christine.
Thank
Be
you.
presenting from this.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christine Schutte, the Public Involvement Coordinator and Planner for AMATS. Just giving you an update on this plan. Just a reminder, TSMO, well, Transportation System Management Operations, short for TSMO, is looking at improving safety and efficiency of what we already have. So we just heard a presentation on TDM. TDM is a strategy that could be implemented for TSMO. So over half of the congestion that you have in an area is non-recurring congestion. That's weather events, special events, car crashes. All of those things are dealt better without capacity expansion. So how can we target issues to improve what's here without new construction projects? It can be spot treatments like a pedestrian signal or crosswalk at an area that's been identified as a near miss, or it can be system-wide where it's a coordinated traffic management center between DOT and MOA so that efforts are coordinated. It's kind of been a quick plan. It started in the end of summer, and they've developed current conditions and best practices, kind of national best practices. We have a technical advisory group that meets to talk about synergies that are already happening in the area and what strategies could work here. We brought the project to the transportation fair. We shared a table with UMED to propose different strategies. We had a survey for the public to weigh in on those strategies, what they think could work, could not work. The consultants are taking all of the input and digesting it right now for a report. And then our next technical advisory committee meeting will look at proposed project lists and criteria for selecting those projects, as well as performance measures that could keep pushing the needle. TSMO is not like a static project, it's a program, and it takes effort and coordination in the area to keep moving the needle so that you can keep improving. So for an MPO, sometimes MPOs have a part of their TIP that is designated as for TSMO projects. So this is the first effort in the area to have a TSMO plan. The state is also working on developing a plan as well. So this is kind of the first stage of that. And when we talk about performance measures, but it's plan as AMATs. Anytime we're identifying new, our overarching plan is the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So as we do these smaller efforts, they are pinpoint focused planning efforts that are always trying to improve the MTP, so that anything that comes out of this plan is just suggestions for the next MTP update, how we can improve and how we can incorporate some of these ideas in those planning efforts. And we probably in early summer, or we should, consultants should have kind of an executive summary, a deployment chapter that we can bring to you for your feedback.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? TSMO. Okay, any questions or comments from the public about TSMO? Hearing none, thank you very much, Kristen. Appreciate it. Okay, one more information item to go. Item 6D, public input platform introduction.
Christine.
Awesome.
Back to you, Kristen.
Yeah, so we're very excited. We're always trying to improve public participation, and we've recently got public input, which is a platform that's kind of targeted to government so that we can have a one-stop shop for engagement. So right now, when there's a planning effort that has a consultant, they develop a website, and then at the end of that planning development, that kind of goes away, and you have to make sure you have all the information off of that. This is all the planning efforts will happen within our public input platform, so the public can come to one place, find everything we're working on. So consultants can still be invited in to help develop those, but then as projects are done, they're archived within our own system. It will open up opportunities for us to expand outreach. There will be SMS texting with any survey that we create, so that we can shoot it out via email or via text message. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. We can ask people how they prefer to get information from us. And so we can keep growing and growing participation, and then look at the area and see, are there areas where we should have targeted outreach that we're not hearing from the community. So our first introduction for this will probably come soon after we're going to have our first quarter newsletter will probably go out in the beginning of April. We'll have a survey for this platform associated with that, where we're just asking people, how do you like to be contacted? How do you want us to contact you? And so we can start building the platform. And the hope is that it's ease of use. You know what you're getting, no matter what planning effort we're doing. It looks the same, it feels the same. You can use it and understand it.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public?
Good idea.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate it. Okay. Aaron, any other project or plan updates?
No, sir.
Not at all. Okay. Move on to general information. Committee comments. Any comments from the committee in general? Not at all. I got a few. Had a great meeting with the Fairview Community Council Executive Steering Committee with the Reconnect the Neighborhoods grant that they received. So DOT will be certainly partnering with that committee, and Neighborhood Works, I think, is the organization, in making sure that the Pell, the outcomes of the Pell and the outcomes of the Reconnect study are aligned and harmonious and all that stuff. So very much already having conversations with those folks, and really appreciate them inviting us into that, and looking forward to more. It may change how the Pell plays out a little bit in terms of schedule or coordination, but I think there's goodness in it, and make for a much better outcome. So pleased about that. Regarding the Seward Highway O'Malley to Diamond, I'm going to read you just a quick message from Shannon McCarthy. So as most of you know, we had some input from the Assembly, we had input from some legislators, to the Commissioner's Office and the Governor, and so the Commissioner's Office will now be conducting listening sessions and working groups. And so the update is this is from Shannon. I wanted to share an update on the project with you. Our design staff is pushing hard and working on a couple of the challenges right now. We're taking a look at updating the statewide transportation improvement program. The project is currently funded after 2023, meaning it's not planning to be bid this fiscal year, meaning any time before October 1st. While we're hoping to use advanced construction funds in our ability to do that, it is pretty limited this year. It's likely the project will advertise in late fall 23 at the earliest for the construction of next year. this is good news. It'll give us time to have conversations. So this is all good. In addition, we're seeing both an increase in bid costs. Inflation is taking a toll on everything. Not as much local, but more rural costs. But we're certainly seeing the bid numbers go up. So we may not have the legislative authority to move forward until later this fall either way. There is an advantage to this. We typically get better prices when our projects advertise late fall or early calendar year. People are more competitive earlier in the year to stack up work for the following season. So that might give us a slight advantage for the construction prices as well. That said, we have some work to complete in regards to utilities. There's a main ACS connection in that area that'll take some more coordination. We're trying to wrap that up quickly. We're going to keep pushing hard on delivering the project and use this intervening time to reconnect with the community and see if we can talk about some of the concerns that the Abilene Community Council has raised in their last meeting. So Shannon McCarthy will be reaching out to legislatures and community councils and AMET's policy committee members and stakeholders, have listening sessions to hear what the concerns are and see if we can ameliorate those concerns and what we can do to work together to move the project forward. The 99% of the project, I think, is fairly solid, but I know there's some questions on a few aspects of the project. So anyway, that was an announcement from Shannon. I want to put that out there. So she is on point for that effort. And if you call me, I will just give you her phone number. And that's all that for. So anyway, other than that, that's all the information that DOT has. Anything else from the committee?
There's actually a quick comment from the Assembly alternate Kevin Cross.
Yes.
Kevin, do you want to go ahead and speak on your comment?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I'm new to AMAT, so forgive me. Perhaps you guys have talked about this in recent conversations. I'm just trying to get who would I speak to and where I get updated on the Artillery Road Glen Highway improvement. That intersection just continues to long plague Eagle River, and I know a lot of work has been done to it. I just need to bring myself up to speed. Wondering who might be able to spend some time with me. Maybe you can just give me a brief outline where we're at. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Why don't you send me a quick email on it, and I'll connect you with the project manager, and we can get you an update on that, okay?
Well, thank you very much.
Any other committee comments? Hearing none, any public comments? Mr. Baskey, state your name for the record.
Sean Baskey, head of the design section at DOT here in the Central Region. So this morning at the all-staff commissioner meeting for DOT, they launched the soft launch of Apex, which is the Alaska Project Exchange. It's basically all of our construction projects that are going out in 2023. While we were sitting in this meeting, they sent out an email to us on our side. The official launch will be after your guys' next meeting. And so I'll just throw in the chat the soft launch of that. And it's got the opportunity for you to go in and look at all of our construction projects coming up in 2023. We'll do the full launch when it's work zone awareness week as we move into construction. But it's got a great look at all the projects that are going on and different ways to filter and look at what's in different districts. It separates it at the state, Senate, and House level, but not necessarily down to the assembly districts or any of the other districts within any of the local governments. But we're looking for comments on all of that, so that way we can incorporate any changes that anybody might want to see before the official launch.
Is that a replacement for Alaska Navigator?
Yeah, so that specific site has a lot of different information in it, including the GIS page, but 511 will be completely revamped. Navigators, kind of moving over to that.
Goes away. Take a shot. Any other public comments? All right, I got 10 minutes to get down my parking meter. Has anybody else got anything to say?
Yeah, I got an 11-minute meeting with you after this.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All right. Any objections? Hearing none. 2:46. We'll conclude this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Give up my parking spot for you.
All right, man. Appreciate that. Taking one for the team.